Hey, thanks. Sounds good. 1 minute late, Jack. We're just trying to. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to start by recognizing that the CVRD is on the unceded territories of the Quw'utsun, Malahat, Subaxat, Halalt, Penelakut, Semanis, Laxan, Pakachin, Didadat, and Pachadat nations, whose people have walked gently here for thousands of years. And with a quorum being present, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Our first item of business is approval of the agenda. Could I get a motion to approve the agenda? Moved by Director Abbott, seconded by Director Martman. Any discussion? All in favor? And opposed? Unopposed, motion carries. We'll now move on to the minutes. We have before us the minutes from the Committee of the Whole meeting of June 25th. Would someone like to move that these be adopted? Moved by Director Kallio, seconded by Director McGonigal. Any discussion? All in favor? And opposed? Unopposed, motion carries. We'll now move on to the minutes from the Special Committee of the Whole meeting of June 25th. Would someone like to move that these be adopted? Moved by Director Segal, seconded by Director Manhas. Any discussion? All in favor? And opposed? Unopposed, motion carries. We'll now move on to public input period. Public input period is to offer the public an opportunity to comment on an agenda item before the committee considers the item. The public input period procedure policy allows for an allotment of 15 minutes, where the speaker is welcome to comment on any items on the agenda up to a maximum of 3 minutes. This excludes items that are or have been subject of a public hearing. Input from the community is valued and appreciated, and we request that your input is presented in a friendly and respectful manner. So I'll turn to the gallery and ask if there are any members of the public who would like to come up to the podium. All right, seeing none, we'll now move on to the next item of business. Delegations. We have a delegation from Rick Martinson, President of the Couch Trail Stewardship Society, and Dr. Aggie Winehill, Professor, Vancouver Island University. If you'd like to come up to the podium. Welcome.
This one, yes. I'm president of Couch and Trail Stewardship Society. Dr. Wayhill is not here yet. She was going to do the presentation. I'm wondering if you could do the presentation in a different order to give us a...
Yeah, definitely. There's another
I could
item.
I could do the presentation, but she's the one that did the research, so she should be the one to present.
Yeah, we can definitely hold off on that one for the time being. There was actually a request to move up another item on the agenda, so this might work well for everyone.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So I am going to turn to staff, and there was a request to move up item R4. We didn't amend the agenda because we were trying to confirm that. I'm getting the thumbs up from our CAO. Okay, so we're dealing with item R4 now. We've got a director who's going to be leaving a bit early today and wanted to ensure that he's part of that discussion. So R4 is the report from the Parks and Trails Division regarding the Regional Parks and Trails Master Plan update, key concepts, and Stage 2 engagement plan. So I'm going to turn to staff if they'd like to introduce the item. Ms. Walker? Yeah.
Good morning. I just wanted to check if Justin's, he should be coming in.
He's on already.
Okay,
Yep. He's
perfect.
probably just in the lobby. He was
Okay.
there.
All right, good morning. I'm Megan Walker, Parks and Trails Planner and Project Manager for the Regional Parks and Trails Master Plan project. We're here today to provide you with an update of the key concepts that are in development. The consultants have been working to work on the update of the master plan in response to the engagement that we got through Stage 1 engagement. We have Justin Ellis here today with RC Strategies Online, who is going to give a brief presentation on these key concepts, and staff is available for questions after that. Over to you, Justin.
Great. Megan, can you hear me?
Yes, can.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. I'm just gonna work on sharing my screen here. One moment. Okay, Mr. Chair, hopefully everybody can see my screen.
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Okay, wonderful. All right, well, good morning, Chair and board members. It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning to provide a quick update on the Regional Parks and Trails Master Plan update process. My name is Justin Ellis. I'm a partner with RC Strategies and one of the co-project managers for the project. Today, I intend to provide an update on our project progress, introduce the draft strategic framework at a high level, recognizing more detailed content is supplied in your meeting packages. We'd like to introduce the key elements of the Regional Parks and Trails acquisition strategy and provide a high-level overview of the Stage 2 engagement plans and our next steps in our work plan. So I'd like to begin with the project progress update. As you may recall, the master plan update's occurring through a 4-phased work plan. We're currently working in phase 4, as this graphic shows. Our focus right now is on interpreting the Stage 1 community and First Nations engagement results and our research, and using those insights to prepare the draft updated master
Mr. Ellis,
plan.
if you could hold off for one moment, we lost the screen. Okay, we're good now. Please continue.
Okay, we're back.
We're back, yeah.
No problem. Okay, so as I was mentioning, our focus right now is on interpreting the Stage 1 community and First Nations engagement results, and as well as our research and using those insights to prepare a draft updated master plan. The project schedule has been slightly shifted to account for our current project process, as well as respectful engagement with First Nations. So we're hoping to wrap up phase 4, as we show in this graphic, in December, and proceed with finalizing the master plan January through May of next year. So with that, our next agenda item is to introduce the draft strategic framework for the master plan that we've prepared. The strategic framework includes the vision, the mission, the goals, strategies, and an acquisition strategy. The framework and the components that we've drafted so far have been informed by our community engagement results, our peer jurisdictional reviews, latest sectoral trends, as well as Cowichan Valley provincial, national, and sectoral related policy and plan priorities. The first element in the strategic framework is the vision, which is an aspirational description of the state of the regional parks and trails system in 2040. The engagement process demonstrated that support remains strong for the vision as it was prepared and provided in the 2007 master plan. However, several gaps in the vision were identified, including the recognition of Indigenous rights and culture, climate change, and ecosystem services. So if you had a chance to peruse the vision in your package, you may have noticed that the vision's been updated from the 2007 draft or vision to include and address the gaps, while also retaining the other key elements of the vision, which dealt with the protection of regionally significant natural areas, connecting people to nature through nature-based recreation, and linking the region's communities through the regional trails. The second element in the strategic framework is the mission. The mission defines the fundamental purpose of the Regional Parks and Trails program. The updated master plan does propose to include a mission for the program, and that mission, as we've drafted it right now, is to secure and manage a system of regional parks to protect regionally significant natural areas and connect people with nature, and to secure and manage regional trails for both outdoor recreation and greenway connectivity. The third element in our strategic framework is our goals. The goals describe what the system's trying to achieve and help focus the actions that we'll be coming up with in the future towards realizing the vision. So to focus the Regional Parks and Trails program, and in keeping with the input that we've heard through the engagement, we've defined 5 goals. These goals update what the 2007 plan referred to as principles. So within that plan, they're called principles. And I'm not going to read the details of each of these goals due to our time today, but the goals focus on the following topics. They focus on reconciliation with First Nations. They focus on conservation of regionally significant natural areas, on people-nature relationships and nature-based outdoor recreation, on connected communities, and sustainable management of the Regional Parks and Trails system. In addition to the vision, the mission, the goals, the fourth component of the strategic framework is a group of strategies. To guide the tangible efforts to achieve the goals that we've just covered, the updated master plan includes 13 individual strategies. Each strategy will eventually include numerous actions that identify the specific initiatives the Regional Parks and Trails program will implement, develop, or proceed with. To help with organization of the plan and these strategies, we've assembled them into 5 service area groupings. And again, given our time today, I'm not able to go into detail on each of the strategies, but I will introduce the service area groupings that we've come up with. The first grouping of strategies is focused on securing and funding the Regional Parks and Trails system. And as you can see here, we have 2 strategies related to this grouping. The second grouping of strategies is focused on administering and planning the network of regional parks and trails. And we've identified 3 strategies regarding this grouping. The third grouping is focused on building and maintaining the Regional Parks and Trails system. And we have 2 strategies defined currently for this grouping. The fourth is focused on managing and stewarding the Regional Parks and Trails system. And we've identified 3 strategies related to that. And the final grouping is focused around communicating and engaging the public and interested parties in the Regional Parks and Trails system. So as I mentioned, each of those strategies will eventually include a number of actions, more tangible, specific actions under them that identify what the Regional Parks and Trails program will be focusing their efforts on over the coming years. So with that, just with covering this strategic framework, I just wanted to transition now into the Regional Parks and Trails acquisition strategy and briefly explore what that element of the plan will include. Key components of the land acquisition strategy that we're envisioning and have begun to draft in the plan include a series of regional parks and regional trails criteria and evaluation tools to help guide decision making around the acquisition priorities for regional parks and trails. It will include an updated listing of areas of acquisition interest, similar to the list of 11 areas that were included in the 2007 plan. And this will identify, as well as identifying priority gaps and new connections in the regional trail network. And the land acquisition strategy section of the plan will also include a land acquisition process. If we turn our attention to some of the findings from the stage 1 engagement, that process, the engagement process, resulted in the identification of 34 nominated regional park acquisition interest areas that, when we boiled all of the input and the data down that we received from the public through our various engagement tactics, there was 34 distinct individual areas of interest. 11 of those were already identified and included in the 2007 master plan, meaning that 23 of the areas that the public identified through the engagement process were new areas. Each of the nominated regional park acquisition interest areas will be screened. We're proposing to screen through a 2-staged evaluation process. Stage 1 would involve the use of course filter criteria to screen out sites based on those criteria. And then sites that make it through the course filter criteria would be evaluated through a set of fine filter criteria. Reflecting the goals that I've outlined here of the Regional Parks and Trails system, the criteria will help to confirm the suitability of nominated areas as regional parks. The course filter analysis, so the course filter criteria, will remove nominated areas if they're already protected, if they encompass First Nation reserves or treaty settlement lands and or fee simple lands that are owned by First Nations, or if the nominated areas are not publicly accessible. Those are the focus of our course filter criteria that we've come up with. Nominated areas that pass through the course filter analysis will be analyzed and scored according to approximately 28 fine filter criterion. And those criterion were identified and provided in your package for the meeting. I don't have time to dig into all of those individual criterion, but they're organized into the following 4 categories. So there's a series of criterion related to conservation of regionally significant natural areas, a series of criteria related to nature-based recreation, to community values, as well as to feasibility and operations. The top scoring nominated areas of interest when we complete the fine filter analysis are planned to be advanced as what we're calling candidate acquisition interest areas. So those will be included in the updated master plan that would be released for stage 2 engagement and review by First Nations, by the public, and interested parties through that engagement process. The draft plan, so that was largely focused around the regional parks. The draft plan is also going to include updated policy language for regional trails. The stage 1 engagement process, in addition to the 34 regional park acquisition areas, also identified around 46 nominations for regional trail connections, routes, or improvements. Our analysis is still in progress, but generally the nominations were for completing an off-road route, addressing off-road routes and gaps in the Cowichan Valley Trail, for using portions or the entirety of the Island Rail Corridor to address gaps in the Cowichan Valley Trail and to create new regional trail connections. They focused around roadside pathway routes, and they focused on short local trail connections, which are likely more suitable for local community park service than the regional park service. Similarly, we're going to be evaluating these nominated connections and gaps, and the evaluation criteria process is still in development. But in general, the criteria for a route to be considered for a regional trail, inclusion in our updated master plan, are the following. The route must be a predominantly off-road based route, so a greenway. It must connect at least 2 CVRD communities or 2 existing regional trail segments. It must be suitable for a Type 1 trail standard, and it must be favorable to securing long-term tenures. Some of the roadside pathway nominated routes are really considered as active transportation routes and are likely more appropriate to be considered under the Regional Active Transportation Plan or other active transportation initiatives within the region. So to bring my presentation to a close today, I'll just provide a brief overview of the Stage 2 engagement plans and our next steps. So the purpose of Stage 2 engagement is to receive input on the draft updated master plan. That's what we'll be focusing on. We're targeting running that engagement process somewhere between October and November this year. It'll run for approximately a month, about 4 weeks. And the engagement tactics that we're planning include First Nations meetings or other engagement approaches that the nations may identify and request, an online public survey, an online interested party survey, and like we did in Stage 1 engagement, we're planning to host 4 open houses distributed throughout the region. So as my final slide here, our next steps in terms of the work plan, what we're going to be working on over the next weeks and months is actually preparing the draft plan. We'll be taking any input we receive today and subsequently and preparing that draft plan. We'll be preparing for and launching Stage 2 First Nations and public engagement this fall, as I mentioned. We'll be hosting advisory group meeting number 5. We've met 4 times now with the advisory group to get us to where we are. We'll be, after we meet with the advisory group in hopefully in December, we'll be turning our attention to finalizing the draft master plan. We'll meet with the advisory group one more time to make sure the master plan is as dialed in as it can be. And then we'll be finalizing the master plan and obviously returning to the board to present the final master plan. So with that, that brings my presentation to a close.
Great, thank you, Mr. Ellis. I'll turn to the committee for questions. Councillor Justice? Or Ms. Walker, do you have any comments to add? All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Ellis, for the presentation. The draft looks pretty, it's going in a good direction from my perspective. I really like the vision and the mission statements, and I think it's developing well. I do have a couple of comments, some input around the strategies. And I also have maybe a secondary, if you'll allow me a second go at it, a question with respect to the acquisition thing. So with respect to the strategies, I mean, it's comprehensive. There's a great number of them, but I do have some thoughts related to some potentially important missing elements that could be they're either missing or could be more explicitly addressed. And the first one is, although climate resilience is addressed, I thought that there could be more of an emphasis on emergency preparedness, preparing for wildfires, flooding, search and rescue preparation, that sort of thing, particularly for regional parks. I was thinking that we might want to add a strategy related to enhancing emergency preparedness and response planning to ensure visitor safety and also protection of ecosystems in the face of natural disasters of some sort. The second thing, sorry about this, because I've been away, so I've been thinking about stuff a lot. While inclusion is mentioned, I was thinking that it might be worth a separate strategy on ensuring a range of access to park and trail facilities, not necessarily universal access, but a strategy looking at making sure that there is something for everybody and that all communities have some degree of meaningful access. So that's my second suggestion. And my third is finally, given recent discussions at this board table related to having more stuff for youth in the community, I thought engaging younger generations might help build long-term stewardship and resiliency into the park plan. So it might be worth considering a strategy related to fostering, next generation engagement through youth-specific programming and that sort of thing. So that's my input on strategy, and if there's any comments you want to make with respect to those, I'd be happy to hear them. But I also would like to ask a question about the acquisition thing, if it's okay.
Yeah, please do.
So with respect to the fine filter evaluation criteria for the strategy, I guess the general question is, have you considered how these criteria will be weighted and operationalized in guiding acquisition decisions? I'm sure you have. As we know, there's 28 criteria across 4 categories. It presents a bit of an issue with respect to how are those things balanced out. I looked at the Comox Park acquisition strategy, and they have 3 categories of criteria, and they don't rate the individual criteria, but they rate the categories, and they value them at 40% recreation, 40% for environment, and 20% for community and social values. Anyway, so that's a general thing, is what is the methodology, what is the strategy for actually taking those 28 criteria under 4 categories and making recommendations for acquisition.
Ms. Walker, would you like to answer those, or?
I'm going to let Justin address that.
Mr. Ellis, did you get all that?
Okay, through the chair to the member, thank you for the comments on the strategies. I don't have any questions about those. I think that's excellent input for us to take away and consider. So thank you for that. Regarding item number 2 there that you raised regarding the criteria, we're still working through the weighting process. Right now, we're leaning towards weighting the criteria by category, very similar to what Comox has done in terms of which grouping of the criteria are more or less important, and applying that weight accordingly. But we are fully open to feedback and input on that, and no final decisions have been made on exactly how we'll do the weightings.
Thank you very much.
Director Wilson.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you very much for the presentation there. I have a couple of questions here. There is a term that you've used of regionally significant natural areas. How would you designate that area as such, and what are the properties that would define such an area?
Mr. Ellis.
Yeah, good question. This is one of the challenges, one of the uniquenesses of the regional parks and trails system versus, how it relates to community parks and its role, compared to community parks and provincial parks. So the definition, I don't have it immediately at my fingertips here right now, but in essence, we're trying to define sites that contain ecological values that are unique or important to the region, i.e. how they've been identified in your environmentally significant areas mapping work that the regional district has undertaken, identifying recreation features that are unique to the region and that attract people from across the region, not just local users in the immediate vicinity, but draw people from throughout the region, and trying to identify sites that, in the case of ecosystem services, that provide services that benefit the region as a whole and maybe not just the immediate area. So off the top of my head, Director Wilson, thanks for that question. That is how I'd respond to that, and through the chair to staff, if Megan would like to add anything she feels I missed.
Thanks, Mr. Ellis. I believe you've captured it there.
Thank you, Chair. And follow up, please.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've always, as you know, concentrated on is how we pay for this. For instance, last year there was $6.3 million just on maintenance of our present parks, and the more we add, the more it's going to cost. Do you have any kind of detailed financial or business plans as to how this is all going to be financed, apart from using the acquisition funding?
Oh, Mike.
Sorry. Through the chair to Director Wilson, this will be, we're not looking at any changes to the directly at this point to how the parks are funded. It's continuing the acquisition fund and the operations funding. So nothing has been proposed so far to change that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And if I could comment on that, this is one of the things that we've been asking for some considerable time. If there's going to be acquisitions, there has never, ever been any kind of costings as to how much it's going to cost us ongoing. And before we go any further with this, I do feel that we should have some kind of costing and say, if we do this, this is what it will cost us. Because like I say, 6.3 million last year, that accounts for almost 10% of our total requisition on the budgets there. I don't have anything against parks. I speak from a financial point of view. We need to be able to say, yes, we can afford this. Right now, we can't. And I have one more question.
Director Wilson, if I could
we'll
just...
leave that at that, and I will put
Yeah.
you back on the list, please. Thank you.
But Director Wilson, if I just comment on that, we don't yet know what types of parks these would be. So if you're going to put in washrooms and signage and parking lots, obviously that's going to have significant costs associated with it. If it's more of a nature park and there's a low level of maintenance, there's going to be different costs associated with that. I'm not sure if that's something we determined through this Regional Parks and Trails Master Plan.
Well, with
or
all
if
due
that's-
respect, sir, the point is if we acquire anything, there will be some kind of maintenance. There will be trails. There is no costings on anything, where it's just a question of, let's buy this. Oh, by the way, it's going to cost you out this much. Let's get it clear right from the start. Thank you.
But my point is, if we're not determining through this process what type of parks are going to be, how is staff going to come up with that estimate? There may be a range, but that's going to require a certain level of detail that I.
Staff come up with estimates all the time, be they Class B, AC, or whatever. There is no reason why they cannot come up with some kind of estimate of this is what it will cost you.
Well, I'll put you back
We
on
can
the
debate
list.
this all day if you like. I don't mind.
Sure, yeah, go for it. All right, yeah. Perhaps staff want to comment on this. Is this the type of detail you would expect to include in the Parks and Trails Master Plan, or is that something that would be fleshed out more acquisition by acquisition as you come to the board for direction on whether we want to pursue some of these acquisitions?
Mr. Chair, certainly your latter point there. At the end of the day, this is looking at an acquisition strategy that is identifying key landscapes across the region that would follow the elements of the plan update, that are identifying park areas of significance that the region wants to acquire. Thereafter, certainly any decisions around any level of investment on a site-by-site basis, as we do with community parks and electoral areas, would be subject to the board's consideration and approval. So certainly Director Wilson's comments are appreciated, but at an early stage, this is really focusing on an acquisition strategy on securing and protecting landscapes of value. Give a good reflection. Back in the 1980s, a particular park was acquired in Cobble Hill, Quarry Nature Park. And at the time, who would have envisioned that multiple decades later, the values of the community and aspirational interests would look to include an off-leash dog park, a bike park, a washroom building, expanded trail network, looking after landscaped areas along the rail corridor itself out in front of the village. So staff could certainly make some attempts, but the realities are, at the end of the day, it's really going to be future boards, future communities that are going to be making decisions around what occurs on lands that are acquired.
Yeah. Ms. Miles Wilson.
I just wanted to add to that as well that the director's comments and concerns are well taken and noted, and that a part of this strategy is going to be around the financial plan, the long-term financial acquisition strategy. But another element that we can take a look at that maybe may not be as profiled is how we develop partnerships with other organizations that also are in the land acquisition business. Such as BC Parks, the Land Conservancy, and others who also acquire, protect, preserve land and develop it for parks. So it may not just be us, but it may be a bit of a network of organizations that we could kind of foster that relationship and look at maybe we're not the only ones in the business, so to speak.
All right,
Thank you,
thanks.
Chair. I appreciate that. And if you could put me back on the list, please.
Yep. You'll have to press the button, though. Great, thank you. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I think this is very exciting. And lots of good work has gone into it. But I'm just going to focus on the things that I think I've got quite a few comments, questions, and maybe just cut me off when you've had enough, and I'll come back a second time. I agree with Director Wilson. I don't think significant natural areas is clearly enough defined, so I'd like to see greater clarity there. The strategies from my perspective, if I was doing this review, I probably would have started with a gap analysis of the region. And I would not just have looked at our parks and trails, but I would have looked at existing parks and trails, because I really appreciated the professor's comment about having a range of access for everyone. And I think that it's really important to understand what we have currently and what exists in the BC Park system. And so, because the ultimate goal here is to provide opportunities for the community to get out and enjoy nature in, fairly easily and accessible way. And it's also about conserving ecosystems. And I don't think we've had a good inventory yet of what ecosystems are protected. And I know it's pretty slim in the east side of the region, so I would like I mean, I think that would have been a good starting point. So that would have been a strategy that I would add, including inventory. I think one of my questions is about a lot of questions around the acquisition. It seems that we do acquisition on an opportunistic basis, which kind of doesn't allow us to, I think, prioritize where our money will be most effective. Because we develop sort of a list, I guess, and then if it comes on the market, we try and acquire it. And I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to think about this in a more targeted or proactive way, because I think that would have a big impact on what we would end up acquiring and doing. Back to strategies. The other strategy I thought that was. There was strategies around building infrastructure, two strategies, I think, around building infrastructure. I think one of the other things you need to think about on building infrastructure is whether what's needed where and when. And again, that should be based on a gap analysis of what infrastructure is out there now. Yeah. I was wondering how the nominations occurred in this planning process. Back to acquisition.
All right, Ms. Walker or Mr. Ellis?
Go ahead, Justin, or Mr. Ellis, you can respond if you like.
Okay, through the chair to the member, thanks for that question and all of your previous comments. We're taking notes like Matt here. The nomination process was undertaken through the public process. So that involved an online web map where members of the public could come in and interested parties, stakeholder organizations, First Nations communities, etc., could come in and drag and drop points on areas that they felt made good sense to be regional parks and or regional trails. So we had a significant number of points dropped. I don't have the exact number right in front of me, but a large number of points dropped and input provided. At the open houses, we had large regional maps where we had a similar exercise and a little paper form where people were able to identify sites that they felt made sense for regional park acquisition, tell us the name of it, tell us why. Through the online survey with the interested parties, we also asked them if there were significant areas or areas that they felt made sense for regional parks or trails and why. And then also through the online public survey, we also provided that same opportunity. So there was a number of ways for the public, for interested party groups that maybe conservation organizations or recreation organizations to identify areas they felt made there was a good case for them to be a regional park.
Follow-up, Director Nicholson?
Yes, thank you. That's what I thought. And so I'm wondering is it possible that some things could have fallen off the, I don't see my nomination on there.
Through the chair to the member, I guess it is possible that some of them could have, or that one could have fallen off. The process that we went through when we had, if you can envision, a large number of areas or sites identified, we spatialized those into our mapping program. We then tried to consolidate areas of points that were referring to similar general areas of interest instead of specific parcels. We brought those together into what we're calling the areas of interest. So that might be why we'd have to double check the exact point, but that might be why you don't see your specific point you dropped, but it hopefully is reflected in one of the broader areas of interest, 34 broader areas of interest.
Okay, one more follow-up, then we'll go to the next person.
So I think that speaks to a transparency issue. And it also speaks to the fact that I have never liked the previous master plan because there's this list, and if you're not on the list, you don't get sort of put on this opportunity to be opportunistic about purchasing it. And I'm wondering, I guess, if you've considered how, when other opportunities arise, how will those be handled? Because if we don't have an inventory, if we don't really know what's out there and where, it seems like we need to provide some flexibility in this plan. That's my final comment.
All right, thank you. Any response from staff?
Through the chair to Director Nicholson, thank you for all that feedback. I would definitely be interested to learn more about where that missing nomination is, because our intention is to be transparent about and to capture all of those and analyze those. So perhaps there can be a way to bring that forward. As for the future opportunities, we're looking to create, as per the 2007 plan, a finite list of interest sites that are based on this nomination and analysis process. That said, we're looking at the fine filter or the filtering analysis as a potential tool to use for future opportunistic sites that do come forward with board support. For example, some of the interest areas that we have nominated now are kind of larger areas, and there may be certain sites within those areas that come forward that we'd want to analyze on their own merit. So we are looking at adopting this or looking at how to utilize this tool of the filter evaluation criteria process so that we can use those for future opportunities.
Okay, I'm going to turn to Director Morrison, then I'm going to switch to one of the online participants after that. Director Morrison.
Thank you, Chair. And great report, read it twice, and there was something in there that I kept looking for, and so it's already been raised about gaps. And I've got a couple of notes here. I hope you can bear with me. So part of this, and just for our consultants' information, I think myself and maybe Director McGonigal were around when the original community engagements were done for the 2007-2008 plan, and yes, there was a failure to address upcoming climate change, sensitive ecosystems in that original plan, and clearly it made sense to move in this direction. But what I was looking for in this document, in this strategy, was where are the people and where are the recreation opportunities, and you know, we're going to be seeing a report on the economic impact of mountain bikers and hikers to the community in a little while, but I'm looking at this and raised so many questions for me. Now, understanding that we are moving in the right direction, but I'm going to tell you from my experience, pendulums swing, and sometimes they swing a little too far. So the areas of concern that I have are for the people that engage in outdoor activities but seem to have been forgotten in this plan. And I'm talking about hunters and fishers and swimmers and ATVers and equestrian folks and motorsports people, campers. And I don't see anywhere in here where they've been considered. You know, just some notes in that, you know, there are other jurisdictions where a lot of these user groups are partners in the development of outdoor recreation activities. Now, I get that we're in a very difficult location in that we're almost all private managed forest lands. There's very little in the way of crown land recreation activities. I get that part. And so the traditional local government park structure may need to be modified a little bit to accommodate a whole bunch of these people that are essentially excluded from our parks now. And I look at equestrians, for instance. You know, I thought that when we started developing this parks and trail system that equestrians were going to be a big part of it. Most of the equestrian enthusiasts that I know don't use our parks and trails anymore. And I raise that because the ban on motorsports and ATVs, that ban that we instituted came out of conflict that was being experienced on our parks and trails. So knowing that there are these groups that people, residents, taxpayers that we represent, I don't see in the document consideration of those people. And while I fully understand the need to start talking about, environmental ecosystem services and protection of sensitive habitats, I also know that we have a responsibility to those taxpaying members of the public that want to get out on the land and recreate as well. And so I saw the term nature-based activities a lot in this report, and there's going to be some other activities that I think it's our responsibility as committee and board to consider. And just as a note for those people that are concerned about the, too much production of GHGs out in the countryside and out in the forests, most of the motorsports manufacturers have committed to 100% electric product lines in the near future. We already see it with e-bikes on our parks and trails. So I raise that. I don't know that there's an answer to my concern at this point. I don't know what level of engagement with these particular user groups has been done. But what I'm reading in the report is it's missing. And I'd like to hear what work has been done so far and what future work can be done to ensure that these groups that would be natural users of our park assets, how they can be engaged and brought into this process.
Ms. Walker, Mr. Ellis, which one you would like to answer that?
I can take a start at that, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director Morrison, for the feedback there. There was a lot there to respond to, so I'll see if I can capture it there all. So as you know, this is looking at updating the current plan. So we're looking primarily at updating the uses that are currently accommodated under the Regional Parks and Trails program. Some of these user groups that you've mentioned are accommodated. Fishing is one example that is accommodated in the current system. As are equestrians in various facilities. In terms of ATVs, as I know you're aware, that there has been previous discussions and direction was given by the board, former boards, to look to the private sector to provide such facilities within the region. We did hear through stage 1 engagement, which did include outreach to these various groups. We did hear through stage 1 engagement that there is demand and interest in motorized recreation through the region. But as per that previous direction from the board, and that this being an update of a current program, that is not currently part of the mandate of this program. So and the engagement process wasn't designed to solicit input from the broader public on changing such a mandate and integrating motorized recreation into the Regional Parks and Trails system. That kind of thing would need to be a board direction and would need to likely need to be a separate initiative to the master plan. we're, as you see in the strategic framework put before you, that the regional, there's a lot of passion and interest in the regional parks and trails system. We see there's very strong interest in the conservation values as well as the recreation values. So we're looking to design or update the master plan in a way that is looking to respond to both those needs and find the balance of those, which is not always easy, especially on a site-by-site basis, but that is the challenge and the mandate of the, we see in the mission statement, we have that dual mandate, so of looking at both the conservation and recreation values. So I hope that answered at least some of your questions, but where are your points? And we'll consider that further as we look to updating the plan.
You have a follow-up, Director Morrison?
Well, I'd suggest that we will have to have a discussion of a resolution of some nature, because I think it's, I wasn't aware that we had exclusions in the mandate and thought that this would be an all-encompassing update. So clearly more work needs to be done, and I will discuss with colleagues around the table a means by bringing forward a resolution to have some of this work included. So, and with that, I'll be departing in a couple of minutes, so thank you.
Director Beeston. Director Beeston, I think you're on mute.
There I am. When we had the open house here in Ladysmith, I had noted that a great number of people were focusing on connectivity and were very interested in Ladysmith becoming part of, the regional trail plans, because we're kind of an island here. And in the acquisition pages and stuff, I don't see any mention of any process to move towards that. And I'm just wondering where that exists, because it is one of the bigger questions that I get when I'm in the community and talking to people, is that they'd like to see Ladysmith actually develop some regional hiking and cycling connections to other communities.
Mr. Ellis, would you like to respond to that first?
Yeah, I can. Through the chair to the director, thanks for that comment. We also heard that, and as part of the regional, speaking from the regional trail standpoint, as part of the gaps in the regional trail, the gaps through Ladysmith and connecting to Ladysmith were some of the most frequently identified. So I think as we move towards drafting the actual plan and showing visually where some of those gaps are that are priorities to fill, I'm fairly confident that Ladysmith is going to be, the connections to Ladysmith are going to be identified as priorities for the regional parks and trail system. I don't want to speak out of turn, but if we follow the data and we follow where the road gaps are, and that was the most frequently identified priorities regarding regional trails, to address those on-road routes, the gaps in the greenway right now. That includes Ladysmith. So I hope when you are pleased with the draft plan when it comes out, that'll be included. We are also familiar with the initiative Ladysmith is undertaking right now with the mountain biking, which depending on where that work goes, that is pretty close to one of the nominated regional park acquisition areas, Hartstocking Lake. So there might be cooperative opportunities there as well in terms of more of the cycling infrastructure and opportunities.
Okay, I will look forward to seeing that. Thank you.
Director Martman.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the report and the staff as well. I'm excited about this, but I'm trying to visualize, long-term thinking on this. And I just, shout out to our First Nations neighbors, about 7 generations. And I think I can see the vision around the trails, but I'm not sure I see the vision as it plays out for the parks. And the reason I'm saying that is it seems to be very patchwork. We're going to acquire all these different pieces, and yet, you know, we know our challenges down the road are going to be drinking water, watershed protection, aquifer protection. And I don't know if we are dovetailing this well enough for me to see the vision long-term. And maybe I'm missing something. Maybe this is not meant to do that. But I would think of, you know, what are the swaths of lands that are going to be valuable to the public 50 years, 70 years from now? And are we starting to think that way with our parks acquisition? What are the lakes that we are you know, that currently are privately owned? What are the lakes that we might want to think about in the future as well? And how do we put a lens on it through, even if it's at this point, how do we put that lens strong enough to say, this is our future? You know, and I know it's around nature and conservancy, but to me, parks is a way of, it's an avenue through that, to that. So maybe this is outside of this, or can it be somehow leveraged or merged together? Thank you.
Ms. Walker?
Yeah, through the chair to Director Martman, thank you for those comments. And appreciate the perspective of really thinking long-term, even beyond this upcoming update's life cycle, but as the system continues to be enjoyed and planned for and expanded. I think I would, so we will reflect on that and how we can integrate or think about how to bring that forward in the plan. But also to kind of refresh that there's the looking to the regional conservation strategy work, which would be taking that kind of much broader look at conservation strategies within the region and how the regional parks and trails system plays a part in that broader approach to conservation and that sustainability over the long term. So there's a relationship between those two projects as that one begins to get underway and developed. But thank you for those comments.
Follow up?
Follow up, go for it.
And the other one is actually a bit more detailed. The comment is around the filter or that's being used that talks about linking communities with the trails. And I'd like to maybe have some consideration to not just within the CVRD, about how the CVRD links to other regions. Because I think, you know, it's all well and said to have those trails, but those trails, you know, if they're for public use and public purpose, then having it connected into the CRD, having it connecting into the RDN, having it connecting into airports, having it connect into ferry terminals, you know, other areas that allow, you know, active transportation to be truly comprehensive. So I think that's a piece that I would add, you know, look at the filter, saying it's also how you can leverage continuation of trails outside of the region. So, thanks.
Ms. Walker, I know in the attachment B, there is reference to improving the trail connections with the Cowichan Valley Trail, which does connect to the regional district and Nanaimo and the Capital Regional District. Could you comment on that, perhaps in response to Director Martman's question?
Thanks for the question, Director Martman. As Chair Douglas brings forward, yes, the CVT does allow for that connectivity connections to, it's part of the Trans-Canada Trail, so it does have that cross-regional connectivity. And
point. I think the point, yes, the Cowichan Valley Trail does, but the Yellow Point Road, you know, the Yellow Point Trail would not necessarily do that. But the Yellow Point Trail could be connected into the airport. Yellow Point Trail could be connected into the ferry department out to Duke Point, so through Cedar. So there is that, almost like, well, it's not connecting Ladysmith to Yellow Point, but it does provide that connection outside of. Right now, if you look at the Cowichan Valley Trail, and you probably know this, it goes into the hinterlands. So there, the connectivity, yes, it goes into the regional district of Nanaimo, but there is no further way to go beyond that. You got the Nanaimo River abyss.
Mr. Farquhar?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, fair points by Director Martman. And so really at the end of the day, it's looking, I think, both the Regional Parks Trails Master Plan update in terms of looking at regional greenways, things like the Cowichan Valley Trail, other opportunities that really sort of fit the greenway format. We also have the regional district's regional active transportation plan that includes things like Yellow Point Road for AT connectivity. So it really looks, I think at the end of the day, from our regional district, how the opportunities between an updated Regional Park Trails Master Plan with regional trails and regional greenways interface with the AT plan, both the regional one, also ones within municipalities, also interest within the electoral areas, that really then becomes a broad-reaching means of connections, not only within the region, but also beyond, connecting to places like Dew Point, connecting to the capital region, connecting to Mill Bay Ferry across the Brentwood Bay. So we really do have that interconnection, not just within our communities, but within communities neighboring our regional district as well. So good points, and yes, this is being looked at.
Director Acton, online.
Thank you, Chair. Great conversation, lots of great points, and I think this is, a great opportunity. I agree with some of the comments about how just being more detailed, especially around the acquisition. I know in Area B, we've lost opportunities, in my opinion, because it was early days of my term. And so then I think if we, provide success early for future boards, that would be really helpful. Then it's really clear and transparent that we want certain lands and in certain spots, and I think we should be really in great detail. Also, to one director's point about the cash flow, ways of working more with forestry land. I know that a lot of the community wants access, and so how can we incorporate other lands that may not belong to the CVRD but can add recreation and future preservation? And I really gel with Director Martman's comments about the watershed, and we've also missed opportunities of acquiring lakes in Area B. So having that really defined and perhaps strategies around the acquisition and the funding is really important. I feel like we can't be too detailed here. And then also that gives us the better opportunity when we have development as well. I think, well, I've already kind of mentioned that, but if we really have it defined, then when the development opportunity comes, it's not a shock to anyone, or it's, for example, like the quarry in Cobble Hill, that is one that could be acquired through development, and the owners know, the community knows, and so then that's something that we see in our future. And I like that idea of going 75 years, 100 years in advance of what do we want to have in our inventory and preservation, and as a percentage, do we want to preserve a certain amount of land in the next 100 years?
Great,
So
thanks.
I guess, are we moving towards incorporating some of those things, especially I think the forestry land, or strategy of like, how can we work with them better?
I can respond to that through the chair to Director Acton. Thank you for all of those comments. Again, there was a lot there to consider. As far as working with the forestry companies. That is something that we will be looking at as we continue to evolve the plan. We've had interviews with Mosaic and seeking to understand where there might be opportunities where we could work together. Some of the nominated areas are owned by Mosaic, so there may be opportunities that we can look at as we continue to develop the analysis and move forward with stage 2 engagement, which will reach out to Mosaic again.
Thank you. Can I just, one follow-up?
Yeah, of course.
Reiterate the point of finding ways that we can make it financially feasible. We are growing quickly, so that's obviously development is a way to get it, parks and preserve areas. But also just how like the forestry companies, how do we ensure that we can preserve all these and working maybe commitments from upper government or I don't know the solutions, but we really are just a small, less than 100,000 people, yet we want to acquire a huge land mass in the next, say, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. So how we could get, not just the idea of people donating land, that doesn't seem to be something that comes to fruition very well. So I think it's something that we're going to have to figure out. Thank you.
Director Manhas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I have a couple of points. The Island Rail Corridor is set up for a regional trail, but the First Nations actually got a court ruling that says if the rail corridor is not going to be used for rail, it's going to revert back to the respective nations. And I know Calton Tribes here have said that they want the land back if not be used for rail. So I think that's off the list unless there's negotiations happen otherwise. And I also believe Ninus up there has said the same thing. In the 2025 publicly nominated regional park acquisition interest areas is Mount Sicker, Lenore, and Tyee, the old two mines up there, two of many. And there's Sasquatch Resources has mineral claims up there, and they're actively working up there. Well, they're doing exploration up there right now, and their whole plan is to once the old waste rock is processed, that they're going to reclaim those as parks anyways. And they've had discussions with Halalt and other local nations. My third point is that. Not initiating the total use of these parks is not a master transportation plan. But a parks and rec plan, as Director Morrison had pointed out. So it's not a master plan without a total input from the users and things. I just think I believe it's a one-sided plan. It's not a master plan. Thanks.
So staff can comment on the Island Corridor, the Island Rail Corridor. My understanding has been the discussion to date is the parts of the corridor that bisect the First Nations reserves. Those are the portions that will revert back to the First Nations, but not the entirety of the corridor. And there are examples, and I mean, sorry, Director Morris is not here because he could speak more on this, but there are portions of the rail corridor where the ICF has worked with local groups to build trails adjacent to the tracks. I don't know, perhaps Director Atkin wants to speak to this as well, or our CAO, Ms. Miles Wilson.
Yeah, regarding the rail corridor, so this board and the ICF board as a whole has supported the land reversion process for those portions that bisect reserve, as you've noted, Mr. Chair. And the ICF has a working group currently struck to advance that work. And so that the priority is to, we don't even really know how long that process will take at the moment or whether those lands will transfer, but that is the intent and interest of the nations as they've expressed. And regarding the rest of the corridor, there is no direction from this body or from the ICF regarding the integrity of the rest of the corridor. And so we've completed the shared visioning project, as you mentioned, and those conversations are ongoing.
All right, I'll now move to Director Deck.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed that that there's one line of that talks about off-road vehicle tourism in Yubo. And I don't want to get too specific because this is an overall plan, but I guess I'm hoping and I'm sure that when this comes up for public engagement, the map will really show us how close to the community it is, because as Director Morrison said, we're surrounded by forest. As soon as you step off the road, you know, when the community ends, you're in private managed forest. So I'm really concerned about how close that would be to the community, and we've seen before where motor vehicles have really caused I guess more than nuisance to the neighboring community. So I hope and I'm sure that you'll really indicate how close we'll be able to hear this, these vehicles. So yeah, thank you.
Ms. Walker, anything to add to that?
Through the chair to Director Deck, I'm actually not sure what area you're referring to, because I don't.
It says off-road vehicle tourism destination. So,
Ms. Walker, I can speak to that.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Ellis.
Through the chair to the director, thank you for that question. That just clarity on process. That broad polygon, there was 2 broad polygons identified through the public engagement process that were just broadly identified as off-road vehicle areas and off-road vehicle potential for off-road vehicle tourism. So I think it's probably along the lines of what Director, I believe it was Morrison, was talking about, is this inclusion of areas and trail systems for motorized recreation. It was a nomination, so it doesn't necessarily mean that we're or the plan will continue that forward as a priority necessarily for the plan. We're just trying to, back to the transparency comment, trying to be as transparent as possible with what sites and areas were nominated by members of the public for what, and that broad polygon area happened to be for off-road vehicle use. Recreating out in that area myself, I think it was probably a recognition of existing use that's happening out there as much as long-term for future use as well.
thank you.
And just for clarity, this is in attachment B to the staff report, so it's section 2, item 39. Okay, I'm going to go now second round. We got 2 more speakers, and hoping we can wrap it up after that. We still have 4 items to get through for this meeting. Okay, there's 3 more second speakers, and then you're getting cut off. Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and I'll try not to be too controversial this time. It's not often that Director Nicholson and myself agree on certain things, and we do actually see eye to eye on the priorities that are a bit involved here, and that's one of the things that I'm really interested in. One of the things, and as you know, I'm always looking into the finances, and one of the things it says in the staff report on financial considerations is that the engagement and communications program is designed, blah, blah, blah. Hello, my screen's disappeared. To be accommodated within the project's approved 185,000 budget funded through budget function 285 parkland acquisition. It was my understanding that the parkland acquisition could only be used for acquisition. And if you look at function 285, it says this function provides for the acquisition of lands for regional parks purposes as guided by. So can somebody tell me how we're taking money out of parkland acquisition to fund something else, please?
Mr. Farquhar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Director Wilson, this was vetted through finance and our alleged services when the interest to do an update to the plan was being looked at, and with the endorsement of the board, it was decided to fund it through Function 285 because the real focus of the plan is fundamentally about land acquisition for regional parks. So that was the premise basis for rationalizing, justifying, determining that this was the best function to undertake this plan update.
Yeah, thank you. And a follow-up on that one, please, if I could. That's interesting that it came to the board because my memory's not as good as it used to be, but certainly I don't recall that. I wonder if we could get staff to point me towards where that was discussed by the board, please?
Yeah, I don't know if they can right now. I certainly recall having the discussion, but I'm sure it's in the minutes and staff could pull it up. Smells Wilson.
Yeah, happy to do that through the chair to the director. We track all decisions and actions, and happy to follow up with that information.
Good, thank you.
Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I was wondering which First Nations have provided input. That's one question, and then I'd like to talk again about the how we go about acquiring things, because I don't think my question was answered at that time.
All right, so first question, First Nations input through stage one, engagement.
Sure. Through the chair to Director Nicholson, we had multiple invites to all First Nations with reserves within the CVRD to engage and to request how they would like to be engaged. The ones that responded to that that we met with were Cowichan Tribes, Penelakut, Malahat, and Seminis. We've also been having dialogue with Halalt First Nation, who have indicated that they would be doing a review of past documents and submitting some written feedback, which we haven't received yet. But and other nations indicated they weren't interested in participating at this time, but we will certainly reach out back again in stage 2 engagement.
That's great. Thank you. So I would like to get back to this how we go about acquiring land. And I'm wondering if it makes more sense not to have a list of things, but to keep it much more open-ended and then develop a more targeted plan. I'm viewing this plan as much as anything as an investment tool for the board to make decisions. And I really think that we need to get our heads around priorities and how we set those priorities. And it really to speak to Director Wilson's concern that if we're going to spend money, which I hope we will, on parks and trails, we really are making the most, because we can't do everything. So it's all about leveraging, it's all about partnering. And yeah, so I a lot more focus on that part, and then not just taking an opportunistic kind of approach, waiting for something to hit the, to become on the market. It also speaks to Director Acton's comment about forestry land. I think we need to be more proactive and try and fill really important needs, because our population is growing. I mean, I really appreciated the comments about 7 generations and the environment side of the parks, but just on the recreation side, people don't have enough places to go and swim in the summer when it gets super hot, and that's really important. So how we balance those conflicting needs is going to be actually critical to whether this plan is successful. So.
Dirk, any response to that? Or just taking it in as feedback?
I'll take that as feedback. Thank you,
Director Justice.
Yeah, thank you again, Mr. Chair. I think this comment or question actually flows out of Director Nicholson's. With respect to the mandate mentioned in response to Director Morrison's questions, I guess to me the mandate's pretty clear. The CVRD wants to prioritize nature-based, low-impact, inclusive recreational experiences. And there's certain things that are excluded, not supported in the plan, like motorized vehicles, ATVs, dirt bikes, large commercial high-impact events, and hunting, or at least the discharge of firearms. But is that mandate spelled out somewhere specifically? And are you able to provide any further explanation about what sorts of activity exclusions pertain to the master and acquisition plan processes?
Through the chair to Director Justice. Well, the Regional Parks and Trails Master Plan as an adopted plan by the board and is in itself, it's the mandate of the program. As far as the like ATVs, motorized vehicle issue, there was direction from the board to specifically to defer or look to the private sector to provide such facilities. You made one other point, and I can't remember what it was. Hunting. I'm going. Mr. Farquhar, respond to that one.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. So I know through Director Morrison, several things were highlighted. And one of them was being hunting. The other one was camping. And maybe I'll just speak to those 2 points. Hunting itself is actually regulated under the provincial regulations, and there's no discharge of firearms or hunting within regional parks similar to municipal parks. So that in itself is a regulation, but it's also within the by default not being explicit in the plan. I mean, we would otherwise have to provide for consideration of hunting to make an exclusion to the provincial regulations. With respect to camping, certainly the elements of providing campgrounds, certainly when the plan was done back in 2006, 2007, it was looked at the time that between the province and between the private sector, that elements of camping and provision of camping between BC Park sites, Ministry of Forest sites, private campgrounds were really the avenues, venues to provide for camping, and it wasn't seen that a regional parks program would be looking at providing for that level of recreation, aka the development, operation, and management of campgrounds. So certainly similar to things like outdoor motorized recreation, if there was to be any shift in direction in terms of prior direction and mandates covered under the current plan, we'd be certainly looking for that direction from the board. But otherwise, the mandate of this board has been to review and update the master plan, and that's currently what's underway right now.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so this report is being provided, and presentation were provided to us for information. We've provided feedback, but no formal decision-making has to take place at this meeting. So I'll thank Ms. Walker, Mr. Farquhar, and Mr. Ellis for sharing this information with us today, and we'll now move on to the next item.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to go back to the delegation that was postponed earlier, so I'll welcome back up Rick Martinson from the Couch and Trail Stewardship Society and Dr. Aggie Wayhill from Vancouver Island University.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Would you like me to start by sharing my slides?
Please do.
Okay. While I'm doing that, I would also like to apologize. I had this in my calendar for this evening rather than for this morning. So I am currently up in the Comox First Nation territory, enjoying some camping with my family.
No, this actually worked out well for us because we wanted to deal with that first item right from the start because we had a director who had to leave early but wanted to be part of the discussion.
Okay, thank you. If with your go ahead, I will just start and work through.
Please do.
Okay. So thank you again for inviting us in and for your patience this morning. My name is Aggie Wheel, and I grew up in the Cowichan Valley. I actually spent most of my formative years living in Lake Cowichan, and have spent most of my life living on Vancouver Island, and I'm an outdoor enthusiast. So this entire discussion this morning was very near and dear to my heart. In 2023, I was approached from the Cowichan Trail Stewardship Society and Cowichan Tourism to look at conducting an economic and social impact study on trails in the Cowichan Valley. And in that process, what we were really trying to determine was the economic value of tourism driven by trail use, as well as the social value of green spaces and trails for residents. We had also done, and when I say we, I'm referring to the World Leisure Center of Excellence at Vancouver Island University. We had done a previous study on visitors and visitor use of parks, trails, and other amenities of the Cowichan region. And we found that nearly 70% felt that outdoor adventure opportunities were important or very important for their reason for visiting the Cowichan region. And just over 80% said parks and public spaces were important or very important. We know that from a tourism perspective, parks and trails are one of the most important assets that Vancouver Island has for attracting visitors from other regions of British Columbia, as well as from other jurisdictions. The research that we conducted was predominantly focused on the mountain spaces within the Cowichan region that focus on mountain biking, with the inclusion of also Stony Mountain and Maple Mountain, which do not have the mountain bike component to them, but definitely are well used from a recreational perspective. The questions we were really focused on is how likely were people to participate in different activities on those trail systems, which trail systems were most likely to be used in different locations. And then we dug into the social and the social and economic benefits by looking at spending of money. And one of the other pieces we dug into were the challenges or concerns experienced while on the trails, looking at both sort of management and upkeep issues, as well as inter-user conflict, because we do know that not all activities are compatible. We had a little over 1,000 people respond in total. Once we cleaned out the data, removed surveys that were less than 50% completed, or where people had put in a very predictable pattern that didn't actually logically make sense. They agreed to two things that they should have disagreed to at least one of them. That left us with 1,010 participants. With a study of this nature, that is considered a very robust sample size. We also collected this data in the October, November, December of 2023, as it was identified that the fall is actually a stronger mountain bike period than other seasons. And I would say that bears out in that our visitor research, we found that hiking and walking were by far more prominent activities than mountain biking in those summer seasons. Now, approximately 82% of our participants were from the Cowichan Valley, and almost all of them were from Vancouver Island. Not surprising given the time of year. However, it is worth noting that the majority of visitation from community to community on the island is other islanders, followed by other British Columbians. What we found is that hikers were our most prominent group within the sample. This is not to say that there aren't, pockets of individuals who may be higher than what we're seeing here. We can't say that this is generalizable to the entire community because it wasn't a random sample that was done. What we can say with confidence, though, is that within the group that responded, hikers and walkers combined account for over half of the group. Mountain bikers account for about 30%. And then we see other groups come down in smaller numbers. What we also learned in this is that there was very, very committed individuals in the community for different activities who were quite upset that their specific activity was not included in the list, such as individuals who do horse driving with some form of sort of wagon behind the horses. From a location and activity perspective, the way you would interpret this is those yellows are hiking, the darker blue is mountain biking, and the lighter blue is walking. So we do see that for Stony Hill, hiking and walking are almost the entire group, with very few people mountain biking on that space. We also see that Mount Prevost, Mount Richard, and Cobble Hill have remarkably less levels of mountain biking than, say, Zuhalem or Maple Mountain, which is not totally unexpected due to some of the development that's been done on Maple Mountain and Zuhalem regarding mountain biking. When we get into the economics, when we really dig into it, the reality is that the equipment purchases drives up the total cost, or sort of the expenditure by participants. The totals that are presented here actually have the main equipment removed because when you buy a mountain bike, it really distorts the value, as mountain bikes can go from anywhere to $5,000 to $25,000 and beyond. We also noted that because the sample was so predominantly sort of representative of locals, that a lot of the expenditure on food and cafe would be underrepresented because those individuals ate at home, or even from an incidental perspective, they were taking snacks from their groceries. So we did see that 10 to 15% of visitors spent well above the average, which is not totally surprising. When we dig in and we start including some of those equipment expenditures and looking at visitor expense, we can start seeing that again, the equipment is a bit distorted, but you start seeing the expenditure on food and incidentals and accommodation go up. The average is distorted because of the ranges. So the median value is a bit better representation, and a median value is where 50% of the values are above this number and 50% are below. It is worth noting that the median value for accommodation is 0 because the vast majority of visitors are from the island, so they simply return home. And we do see this in most tourism-related research across the island, and I've done research now in about 6 different regions on the island, and the vast majority of visitation that we see on trails is day users from other communities. When we get into the benefits of the trails, and this is where my biases will come through. I'm a leisure researcher and a very strong proponent of the value of leisure and trails for recreation and for social well-being.
Hey, Ms. Wayhill, or Dr. Wayhill, if I could interrupt you for a moment. We're just about running out of time on the delegation, but I'm going to ask the board if we can extend by 5 minutes. Could I get a motion for that? Moved by Director Kallio, seconded by Director Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Unopposed? Motion carries. Please continue.
I'll go through very quickly. What we really found is that socially, people were using the trails as part of their identity to enhance their self-image and to connect with other people. It allowed them to be part of a cohesive group and active in those groups. What we saw as sort of differences, and I think these are some important things that we need to focus on. We do see that hikers tended to be more female, mountain bikers tended to be more male. hikers tended to be older, mountain bikers tended to be younger. Hikers had a greater percentage had a lower income, and mountain bikers tended to have a higher income level. You will have a copy of this. You will see that there is a distribution that's fairly predictable around the hiking and mountain biking at different locations that are aligned with the development of mountain biking. If mountain bike trails are built, people will use them. There is a definite spending difference in that mountain bikers do tend to spend more money. However, hikers will spend significant amounts of money, usually on a less frequent basis. And there is much greater opportunity for people to spend higher amounts in the Cowichan Valley because of the bike shops than the availability of other outdoor recreation spending. What I really want to get across is the important findings, is that the trails in the Cowichan Valley are significant for social well-being of users. They provide a low-cost, low-barrier access to recreation that's physically active and socially connected. The finding of the number of older adult women using trails was a bit surprising, and the fact that they went in larger groups was incredible, given that social isolation in older adults has the same morbidity or mortality impacts as smoking and sedentary lifestyles or obesity. Mountain bikers tend to be male and young and middle adulthood, and it provides a space for them also to be physically active. From a conflicts perspective, the reality is that the main conflicts were, quite honestly, off-leash dogs were the biggest issue, and hikers being unaware that they shouldn't be walking up a downhill trail, and sort of that speed or fear of injury perspective. If I can leave you with anything, it's that trails are important for residents. They're important for attracting visitors. They are an incredible contributor to social and physical well-being. They contribute to the economic well-being of communities, but in many ways that should be considered as secondary to the social and physical well-being. And they have strong potential for local and regional growth. And listening into the previous discussions, trail networks across the island are a way of developing our destination as an island, as well as that active transportation. And with that, I will stop my presentation.
Great, thank you for that. I'll turn to the committee. Any questions for our presenter or Mr. Martinson? I have a couple questions, but I'll turn to Director Nicholson first.
I just wanted to say thank you. It was really interesting.
I'll echo that. I had two questions. One is with regards to the categorization of activities. So the distinction was made between hiking and walking, and just wondering why that distinction was made, because when I look at Mount Zehalem, Maple Mountain, Mount Richards, Mount Prevost, I mean, you could walk up the mountain, but I think you're hiking, whether you call it that or not. Is there a way to combine some of these categories? Because to me, it makes it look like hiking isn't as dominant of an activity as it actually is in some of these sites.
I can address that question if you would like, Chair. The reason that there is a distinction is for two primary purposes. From an equipment purchase perspective, hikers tend to have a completely different set of equipment, and so their economic sort of impact tends to be a bit higher. It also tends to be a much more planned activity versus walking. The other thing is that those two groups individually identify very differently. One group would include going for a quick walk with your dog. One tends to be longer distances, looking for terrain that tends to be more challenging. And again, it's that part of that identity perspective. That all being said, from a management or sort of planning perspective, the actual physical use of those spaces is very similar. So I do think that from a managerial perspective, you could very clearly put hikers and walkers together. You could potentially even put trail runners into that group, as they're all using the physical space similarly. That being said, as individual recreation users, they see themselves as very different users, looking for very different things on those trails.
Great, thanks for that. One other question, and then turn to my colleague, Director Martman here, but it's with regards to the estimated spending, particularly with the visitors, but also the locals as well. Do we have any sense of whether that spending is being done locally, or is it in other communities, or is it being done online? And I think particularly hikers, I mean, many of us, perhaps less so since Mountain Equipment Co-op stopped being a co-op, but that's been one of the most popular places on the island for many years to buy equipment, which is great if you were a member of the co-op in years past, but doesn't necessarily bring economic benefits to the Cowichan regional economy. But Dr. Whale, perhaps comment on that. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. I would have sort of two answers to this. One, I'm always skeptical of spending estimates anyway, because people are not very good at estimating what they earn or what they spend. And depending on the circumstance, we will either underestimate because we don't want the people in our lives to know how much we spend on our equipment, or we'll overestimate because we're sort of it's ego driven. So I'm always skeptical. That's the one thing I would say. From a question perspective, we did ask specifically how much money they had spent in the Cowichan Valley region in the previous 2 months. And so we did ask them very specifically about spending in the Cowichan region, not the CVRD specifically, but in the region. So I'm hopeful that they at least had limited themselves to that. But this is a notoriously difficult calculation. The better way to get to this information is actually to purchase large data from credit card companies.
Okay, thanks for that. So it sounds like your interpretation of the data is to take the economic spin-off benefits maybe with a grain of salt, but emphasize the social benefits as there being really something important there for us.
That is exactly what I would say, and I think from given that trails they're largely paid for by local or regional taxpayers, I think the local health and well-being benefits are often underestimated and undervalued in decision making. That being said, we do know that trails and park spaces are of vital importance as an attractive asset for tourism. And we know that tourism does bring in strong economic contributions. For Vancouver Island, however, a lot of that contribution is coming from people from other regions of our island. So while we have that sort of local economic impact, we're not necessarily seeing it on the provincial GDP, but we will definitely see it in local spending.
Great, thank you. Director Martman, then Director Manhas.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this research and sharing it with us. I'm wondering if within your research you can speak to or extrapolate out to whether we have capacity within the parks we have right now for more use, or should we be thinking of expanding? Because we're talking about our trails and parks earlier before you came on, and should we be expanding other areas for those potential uses? And that's the first question. The second question is, you spoke to the health benefits. Pretty significant health benefits. Could you share some links to that at some point?
Certainly. Thank you for the questions, and through the chair to the director. We did not look at sort of carrying capacity or limits of acceptable change as far as how busy those trails were. We were also at those trail sites in months where we would expect to see lower levels of use. I mean, we used multiple ways of collecting data, but one of them was trailhead intercepts. And, you know, as most people on the island know, October, November, December isn't the greatest weather for hiking and walking. And it's not our peak season for visitation. Having lived on the island for a long time, I would say that we probably have some what I would call episodic over-tourism and episodic overuse. So you likely do have times of the year where your trail systems are potentially overburdened. You also have, like, there is a great diversity of trail systems within the Cowichan region. But as the region grows and as tourism grows, the dispersion is what actually helps reduce the conflict between users, as well as minimizing the ecological impacts. And as someone who has spent a lot of time on Zuhalem, there are days where even with the enhanced parking, it is crowded. It's crowded from the user perspective and just trying to access, but it's also crowded from the trail use perspective. And so you would need to do a different study to truly measure whether or not the usage requires acquisition. I am too biased to give you an unbiased answer on whether you should be expanding, because my answer is always going to be yes. And I apologize, your second question has slipped my mind.
About getting links to the health benefits. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. I can provide links to a broad range of research that speaks to the health benefits, and to me the most surprising and the most exciting as a researcher truly was the number of people who were using the trails as an opportunity to be out with other people, because we see social isolation as one of the greatest health threats facing Canadians, but quite honestly, globally. It's one of the top priorities for the World Health Organization right now.
Thank you.
Director Manas. Yeah, well.
Keep forgetting. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Wayhill, for your presentation. But my question is for Mr. Martinson. Just in the last week, I had 3 people meet with me regarding the conflict on the mountains between mountain bikers. They're dominating our trails, especially on Mount Zuhalem, and against hikers and bikers. So I'm just wondering if you will be presenting this report to North Cowichan Council so we can ask you more specific questions about our North Cowichan, from our residents of North Cowichan who have concerns about the dominance of mountain bikers on our mountains.
Mr. Martinson.
Thanks, Director Manhas. And I did get copied on one email with that conflict. And yeah, I'm not 100% the information in that message was accurate, but I have no problem making another presentation. We're actually thinking of doing a presentation or a delegation to North Cowichan Council on another matter as well. So we certainly can do that, and I will mention that at a board meeting tonight.
Yeah, thanks, because this conflict's coming up more and more now. Just like I said, just last week I met with three individuals, and our director of Parks and Rec is actually taking the concerns right now. So hopefully they'll come to a resolution.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Dr. Wayhill, comment on that?
I do have a comment on that. So this came up within our research, and one of the recommendations of our research is that there needs to be greater education done with trail users. And because one of the things that became clear with the research is that mountain bikers and hikers don't actually necessarily distinguish between which trail is for them and which one's not for them. And I would say that this is more the case for hikers and walkers not understanding the actual design of mountain bike trails and you shouldn't walk up a downhill trail. And so I think that there is an opportunity to also help mitigate this conflict by improved signage, really speaking to trail etiquette. The other piece of this that came through, as I mentioned, was the unleashed dog issue. And that was both mountain bikers and hikers being concerned with potential injury to themselves or to, in the case of mountain bikers, to the animals, because dogs were running across trails. So there is definitely room for a lot of community education as a way of mitigating these challenges.
Thanks for that, Director Callio, to close. Here, one sec.
Thank you, Director McGonigal. Yeah, a great presentation. It has a lot of information in there. And I completely agree with your analysis about the well-being. I use the trails all the time myself, and that's where I find I can do my best and foremost thinking when I'm out there hiking with my two Frenchies. But yeah, the health benefits that you acquire, and you know, I do believe they're totally undervalued, you know, for the community and what those areas that are set aside as parks and trails provide for the community and for everybody in this community. So completely in agreement with that. And as far as the conflict goes, I mean, using the trails myself all the time, I have had very little conflict on the trails, and most of the time if there's conflict, it's because I've taken the wrong trail. So that's something that I do completely agree with you, is there needs to be, I'm not sure what kind of education we can bring forward for trail users, from mountain bikers to hikers to walkers to horseback riders, but you know, there needs to be some way to educate the people when they go out there. Like I say myself, I've been guilty of going up the wrong trail, and once you're halfway up, you realize that now you've got to go to the end. And as far as unleashed dogs go, yeah, I've run into a conflict up there. 99% of dog walkers up there are you know, good people to encounter, but sometimes there's the odd ones that you know, I think they feel the conflict themselves, and so you know, take it on themselves when they're there.
Thanks, Director Callio. All right, I think that concludes our comments and questions. I want to thank Mr. Martinson and Dr. Wayhill for your presentation today. Very timely as we're considering next steps with our Parks and Trails Regional Master Plan today. So thanks again.
Thank you very much.
All right, we got 3 items to go here. We're going to now move on to a report from the Economic Development Division regarding the Agricultural Land Matching Program Annual Update. Mr. Reardon.
Good morning, Chair and Directors. Thank you. As you see today, the purpose of today's report is to provide an update on the Young Agrarians BC Land Matching Program that's being supported by CVRD through Economic Development Cowichan. In April 2024, the board approved $30,000 to be provided to the Young Agrarians to support the land matching program taking place in Cowichan. That funding's for a 3-year period, 2024 to 2026. The program continues to be a success in Cowichan. In 2024 and 2025 year, they met the agreed upon deliverables that were agreed to as part of the CVRD funding. And today's report is for information and is accompanied by a presentation from the Young Agrarians. So today we have Darcy Smith, Ari Westhaver, and Pascal Skitikat. Hopefully I pronounced most of those right. I'll hand it over for their presentation now. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. One moment while we get the slides up.
Just have to scroll with this because it's a PowerPoint, not a PDF, not a PowerPoint.
Okay, scroll or?
Yeah, just
Okay.
the red thing, if you pull it down, it goes to the next.
Okay, great. All right, lovely to be here again. For the interest of time, I think a lot of you are familiar faces, so I will skim through our first slides and get to the meat of the update today. For those who are new to Young Agrarians, we are an educational resource network for new and young farmers, the largest in Canada. Since 2012, and we have 6 programs. Our mission is to grow the next generation of farmers and food lovers. We do that by engaging people who are curious about farming, getting them connected to resources and education, helping them access on-farm training, and then, of course, the purpose of today's talk, accessing land so they can start their farm businesses. And then mentorship so that their businesses can reach viability and they can stay in agriculture for the long term. We have also started really focusing on policy work as the thing that underpins the ability of farmers to succeed on the ground in so many cases, as well as the farmers' hard work and entrepreneurial spirit, of course. We work with a lot of farmers across Canada. Last year, 2,800 farmers and hundreds of landholders in BC a year as well. Young Agrarians is all about collaborating and connecting people. The BC Land Matching Program is specifically designed to connect people. So farmers who are looking for land with those who have farmland and would like to share it for the purposes of agriculture. And we hit a threshold, a milestone recently of 405 matches in BC on 13,000 acres. This is our funnel, just representing all of the people we engage who are interested, and we guide them through a process of self-assessment towards readiness for matching, and then we do get to match some of those people and see them start farm businesses on shared lands. In the Vancouver Island and Gulf Island region, that looks like 110 land matches on 448 acres, so about a quarter of our matches coming from the island, and 22% of our island matches coming from the CVRD. It is still our busiest region, the Vancouver Island region. Lots of people interested on the island, which is always great to see. This is a summary of the land matching services, but really we're hands-on all throughout the whole process to ensure that both farmers, land seekers, and landholders have a touch point to help them access information, support decision-making, and then also to do the facilitation and matching to get people towards successful agreements. And you'll all have had a chance to read Natasha's success story in the slides that were circulated earlier. But just to highlight, Natasha's a great example of a farmer who approached us early in her farming career, wasn't quite ready, sought training, apprenticeship for a couple years working on farms, came back to us, was matched to land, and was then able to access mentorship as well, and is thriving up island, unfortunately. Maybe you folks could convince her to move down here, though. So the meat of it, challenges and opportunities. We all know the challenges: climate change, inflation, things are really expensive. There's a labor and new farmer shortage in agriculture, farm renewal crisis, where there aren't enough new folks coming into agriculture to meet the needs of local food systems and those who are trying to exit agriculture. Housing shortages and the high cost of housing in rural areas continues to be a challenge. And of course, as you folks heard last year, water licensing risk around starting new farms in the era of climate change that we're in.
We talked last time a lot about the moratorium on water licensing and the water system issues, the supply challenges around water, and how limiting that will be on agriculture into the future. The need for existing water licenses continues to limit the number of viable land opportunities that come into the program. Notably, we had one land opportunity in the CVRD last year that came with an existing water license. That was the land opportunity we were able to match. So when there is a water license, it's an appealing opportunity and very matchable. When there aren't water licenses, we're generally not able to progress those land opportunities into matches because without water, no farming. Lots of opportunities, though. We spoke last year about the time and energy that the land matcher, Ari is our new land matcher, puts into the Cowichan Valley and prioritizing the CVRD for outreach and education. This includes where Young Agrarians chooses to host events as well as where we choose to target our other outreach work. So we do on-farm land access events when we can, fall land linking workshops. We also attend the Islands Ag Show and other regional farm community events. There is a huge opportunity, I think, in the CVRD to attract farmers through farmer-supportive zoning, bylaws, housing policies, and, of course, community water infrastructure. A lot of folks do want to come and farm in the CVRD and hit limits around housing or regulatory barriers or this water infrastructure piece. And we see a real opportunity for supporting transitions of established farms with existing water licensing and infrastructure to promote that farm renewal. This preserving existing infrastructure, existing water licenses, when people do want to transition out of agriculture and ensuring a farmer is able to take on those opportunities, that's where we see the biggest opportunity in the CVRD coming up and really around BC as water licensing will continue to be a limiting factor. The RDNO has just let us know that they won't be issuing new water licenses, so this is not an isolated issue in the province. We also see lots of opportunity to collaborate with the CVRD and with ECDEV on outreach to landholders. And in addition, education and apprentice opportunities will draw potential farmers to the region. I think as the farm labor crisis worsens, more attention has been drawn to the need for training and employment opportunities. So Young Agrarians, we launched our apprenticeship program in BC last year. This is our second season running this on-farm training program. And the apprenticeship program coordinator, who was the former land matcher for Vancouver Island, Kiyomi Ito, she'll be focusing on recruiting some farms in the CVRD to hopefully get some apprentices into the region and, they'll fall in love with the trails and all the other things that the CVRD has to offer and hopefully stay and start their own farms. VIU Cowichan's micro-credentials course offers another great localized training opportunity. And we're looking at potential right now for collaborating with Cowichan Green Community on some agricultural training things that they're doing. So as I mentioned, we prioritize the CVRD for speaking engagements and networking opportunities. And we've really seen benefits from that over the last year, seeing increased opportunities for collaboration. And the whole goal of our outreach is really to increase the farmable land opportunities in our inventory so that when we do have farmers interested in the region, we have viable opportunities that have water licensing or water access available that we can connect them to. So recently we've participated in a number of events in the CVRD, and coming up, we're co-hosting with the Cowichan Ag Society a farm tour locally, and we'll also be tabling at the Cowichan Fair, as well as hosting our Land Link in the CVRD at the Hub in the fall, a favorite venue of ours in the province, actually. And we also are around the island participating in other events, highlighting the opportunity to farm in the CVRD whenever we can. little summary of how appreciated the CVRD events are, especially in terms of the land links, where 100% satisfaction with the events, 77% of people saying they would use the knowledge gained within the next year. Lots of positive things about both the education as well as the networking connections that come out of those events. Last year, actually, the Land Link we hosted in the fall was one of my favorites that we've ever done. We had a super engaged bunch of folks who attended, and hopefully some things will still emerge from that event. Sometimes these things take a bit of time to cultivate. That's it. Just to wrap up with a big thank you to the Cowichan Valley Regional District for supporting this really important work to ensure that farmers, both new and established, are supported with land sharing in the region, as well as our other funders. Thank you.
Thank you for the informative presentation. Got a question here from, or comment from Director Justice.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. There's no doubt about the importance of this work that you're doing, and I certainly do not underestimate the challenges that you face in making land matches. Looking at the list of some of the matches, the examples, I was a bit surprised by how short-term many of them are, and in fact, many of them are just one-year MOUs. So I was wondering if you could speak to that, and are these trials, are they often renewed? And I haven't seen any figures about, I've seen figures about numbers of land matches, but not renewals, if that's the case.
Yeah, so a lot of these shorter term initial one-year matches are people who want to do a trial year before they lock in, so to speak. So they are wanting to make sure it's the right fit, both for the landholder and the farmer. The landholder wanting to ensure that this person is going to meet their obligations on the land and treat it respectfully. The farmer making sure that this is the right place to start investing. So a trial year gives them that opportunity before they go into more of a renewal situation. The Island Land Matcher often does a lot of renewal support because of these one-year trials, and we have an evaluation framework for the BC Land Matching Program. We track renewals, matches that move on to other opportunities, or matches where the farmer stops farming, and we track reasons for that. We look at success in terms of, does a farmer keep farming and does the land stay in production rather than someone staying locked into an opportunity. Sometimes, getting the opportunity to buy farmland or move to a bigger site is a success. Does that mean the match has failed? No, it's a bit of an incubator, a jumping off point for the farmer to reach that success. We do medium-term evaluations of the program. The last one was in 2022-23. We'll have another one coming up this winter. So at the next report, we'll have an update there in the spring from that survey. I'm also happy to provide ECDEV Cowichan with the results from our last survey if the board is interested in learning more about the outcome of that. That's not broken out into the CVRD because we're not asking the survey participants which specific region they're in, but there's lots to be taken away from that.
Thank you.
Director McGonigal.
Thank you, Chair. Through you.
One sec, sorry. You go.
There we are. We're on now. Thank you, Chair. Through you. First of all, the continuous accolades towards the CVRD are much appreciated. Just a comment first, if I may. We certainly understand the complexities of the water licensing problem, not only here, but throughout the province, and the impacts it would have on the food security topics that we have discussed, not only here, but specifically on Vancouver Island. Has there been any consideration towards reaching out to some of the larger private managed forest owners on some inventory that may reside within them under ALR designation?
We have had some interactions with forestry lands in the past. It's not been a focus. It's certainly something that we could look into, and if the directors have any connection points into those forestry companies, we would certainly receive that well and love that support.
I think that around the table, some of us have those connections. I'm sure we'd be happy to facilitate that in any way we can. Follow up, Director? Okay. Director Martman.
Hi, and thank you very much. This is really valuable information, but the but for me is, are you looking farther down the road in terms of time, like the next couple decades? What I'm thinking about is the aging out of farmers, and wondering if you're finding there's a pattern there already about your land matching is with farmers that are aging out, is sort of the first question. And the second question that may go with that is there, you mentioned briefly about zoning and how zoning can be favorable to making land matches happen. I'm wondering if you could speak to a little bit of both of those, and I have a follow-up.
Okay, so first question about transition, and I would say we work with both landholders who are farmers and non-farmers. We've seen a lot of transition over the last years where folks who were farming got to the point where they needed to sell their land and they were not able to sell it to a farmer, and a non-farming landholder has come in and maybe they lease to a farmer, maybe they don't. We actually produced a toolkit for non-family farm transition in BC in 2021 in direct response to the many conversations we had with farmers who really wanted to see their legacy passed on to a farmer, but with the cost of land, that not being a straightforward transaction anymore. So this is something where we really think that ensuring that these exiting farmers can transition their land to a farmer and their business to a farmer is one of the biggest opportunities. So it's a huge focus point for us, not just in the CVRD. Part of the policy work that we're invested in is really around land access, big picture. The BC Land Matching Program is one facet of land access. Ensuring this transition piece is another big one. So that can look like land trusts, supporting creative real estate transactions like vendor take-back mortgages, or cooperatives being able to purchase land. That's somewhere where perhaps housing bylaws, zoning could, whether that's at the local level or the ARR level, could contribute to this sustainability, is for multiple owners to be able to live on site, farm together, rather than not be able to access the housing to live on site. That's a challenge we often hear. If people want to manage land in community, the housing is insufficient. And I don't want to speak too much into the bylaws, the regulatory frameworks that impact farmers, but generally, in every consultation we have with new farmers, established farmers, they are feeling pinched by regulations at every level of government, and it creates a lot of challenges. So that's something I think beyond the scope of what I can answer specifically today, but we consistently hear it, and we could provide more details for sure in a report.
Director Morrison.
Thank you, Chair. Read your material over the weekend, so my apologies for missing some of your presentation, but, and you may have covered part of this, but, you know, at the end of the day, everything's all about water. And whether it's the development community competing for water licenses, the farming community, clearly there's a real issue in people getting access to water. There's areas of this region that water's plentiful, others not so much. What can we do to help this sector and what you're doing have that priority access? Like, you could do all the work in the world, you can't access water. What can you do? So how can we help?
I mean, every sector wants priority access, right? So here we're talking about young farmers, new farmers. I think that we mentioned community water infrastructure in the presentation. I do think that is an opportunity. Investment Agriculture Foundation of BC has a grant stream for community water infrastructure projects that could be explored to see if there are opportunities to create something in the CVRD specific for farmers who aren't able to access water licenses that would not impact the surface water aquifer systems. that could be a real opportunity. And then I think, it is going to be competing priorities, and looking at other ways that don't involve finding more water to create sustainable farm businesses. So for our Land Link in the fall, we're bringing in a water specialist who will be able to talk to people about ways to reduce water in their farming. I think that's, it's not just about distributing the water and getting priority access, but it's about farming smart to reduce the need where possible. So very multifaceted, complicated, no easy solution. Okay, great.
Yeah, just to add there, one additional way that we're looking at with the the Investment Ag Foundation grants is to be available to maybe support grant applications for farmers to be able to look at that infrastructure to support an individual to support them with the grant applications, because that's definitely one of the barriers, and there's a big opportunity there for funding. And then, yeah, the draft strategic plan for economic development Cowichan also has a few elements in there to look at addressing some of these barriers. So we can look at that when that comes back to the board. Thank you.
All right, I've got 2 more speakers. I just want to remind the committee we still have 2 items to get through, and then we got to go in a close after that with a couple more items. Director Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for that. Thanks for the great work that you do with the farmers. One of the most worrying things is the amount of, as you've mentioned, the succession here, where a farmer ages out, nobody else can afford to buy it apart from somebody who's not going to be using it for farm uses. And I've had an email from a couple of farmers. Farmers are losing money, 457 million last year. How can you help here? What do we have to do to maintain the farming land that we've got so that we are self-sufficient? Because the big one, something's going to happen soon, and we're going to need you guys. How do we preserve what we've got and maintain what we've got? Big question.
Yeah, big question. And, I think preserving the farm assets in a region is really important. Food and farm businesses, when you look at economic multiplier effects, have higher multiplier effects than other sectors. So when you're talking about local resilient food systems, very important. Community economic development, also very important. Young agrarians can't help every farmer. What we do specifically is support new and young farmers to build businesses that hopefully won't lose money. That's the mentorship, the risk management in the land matching. For us to be able to do that work, that's really important. That's setting those farmers up to be able to succeed long term. The number one thing that new farmers, that all farmers, I think, say would benefit them the most is grants, financial support, access to capital. It's one of the biggest limiting factors, especially for new farmers. So in terms of what the CVRD could do, looking at financial support for farmers. And I mentioned land trusts, this piece about purchasing land. It's so expensive that will farmers ever be able to afford to buy that land in those succession opportunities? Likely not. That's a rare occurrence. It takes a lot of will, both on the farmer's side and the exiting landholder side, to make those creative transactions happen. So regional districts that are supportive of land trusts, maybe an acquisition strategy for farmland to make it available for not to wade into that, but really considering these properties as assets for the community and not just the landholders or business owners who are on those properties, I think is important.
And follow up, please, Mr. Chair, that one of the other things that maybe you could be working on is the amount of regulations. This is one of the most over-regulated sectors in Canada, in BC. so many regulations in there. Is anything you're doing on that side?
Yeah, that's what a lot of our policy work is focused on. So we are constantly feeding back to the provincial government, and when we have opportunities in reports to you folks, for example, about regulations, things we're hearing from farmers on the ground, and advocating for, ensuring eligibility criteria aren't shutting out new farmers in programs that are intended to support them, and also highlighting opportunities for regulation that would be favorable to new farmers. We released a national new farmer framework, and we're working on provincial strategies to really contribute to the next policy framework for agriculture in 2028, really focused on addressing those areas of access to land, access to capital, access to training and mentorship, and then infrastructure and regulation as the key leverage points that will allow us to build towards farm renewal. So,
Good. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Director McClinton, and then online, and then Director Martman to close.
Thanks, Chair. I listened to an interesting podcast by Carol Taylor, the old finance minister for 2005 to 08, and she was interviewing somebody that had been involved with food processing, and people are interested in potato chips, not potatoes, and just different ways to get product to market. Just wondering if there's, not necessarily just with the CVRD, but anything of that nature being looked at to support our farmers and just sort of a value add for their products.
value add is a huge opportunity. Barry's going to speak more to that, but maybe I'll just say first that this is an area that farmers could really benefit from being able to access value-added markets because it increases the value of their product. Access to capital, especially for new farmers, is a real barrier here. They're not able to access the funding that would allow them to develop the infrastructure to enter the value-added market in a lot of cases, or they sometimes encounter regulatory hurdles that prevent them from doing that as well.
Just to add about Catchin Green Communities Farm and Food Hub, which the CVRD supported an application, 800,000 through the province a few years ago, which is under development, and they are in their last push for funding, a funding round to get that built in the near future. So it's under construction right now. So that's one significant major asset that will be coming to Cowichan once they have secured their funding. Thank you.
So, great questions, everyone, but we are getting into a broader discussion about the agricultural sector, which is valuable, but the purpose of today's delegation was more on the specific land matching program and how the $10,000 a year contribution we've made has been leveraged to get some great tangible results on the ground. Just want to remind everyone that was the focus of today's delegation. Director Martman. Sorry, I'm having a bit of trouble here. Go for it.
No trouble at all. And I think it just leads to the last question I have, and maybe this is pertinent because we were talking about parks, and I believe agriculture is part of permitted use on a park. Have you had any luck within the CVRD, with local governments within the CVRD at matching with public lands?
No. Something we would be happy to explore. I'm sure some of you might have some ins there that we could talk about.
Okay, I would look forward to maybe next year having a report saying that there's been some local government initiatives. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Director Justice here is chair of our Agricultural Advisory Committee at North Cowichan, and that committee, which includes local farmers, is working on a new strategic agricultural plan, and I believe the idea of making some municipal land available for leases for farming has come up in some of their discussions, so someone you may want to connect with.
I believe our land matcher has engaged a bit there, and our new land matcher will continue to. So, yeah.
All right, thanks again for the presentation.
With your permission, I brought some stickers, postcards. I could pass them out if that's okay.
Yeah, please do. Great, thanks again.
Thank you all so much. Lovely to be here as always.
Okay, we've got two more reports here in the open agenda. We'll move on now to item R2. This is a report from the Emergency Management Cowichan regarding the Regional Emergency Management Establishment Bylaw number 4650. Ms. Diver?
Thank you, and good morning still. I will try and keep it very short. I don't have a formal presentation. The bylaw is a repeal and replace, and it is, we believe, fairly straightforward. The staff report does guide you through the bylaw changes. So if it's at the discretion of the chair, I can sort of walk through those changes very quickly, or I can turn it over for questions.
No, I think the report was straightforward. No questions from me. What about the rest of the committee? Director Segal?
Thank you. Considering that, these are changes required to comply with EDMA, I'd like to move the recommended resolutions.
It's been moved by Director Segal, seconded by Director Wilson. Call the question. All in favor? And opposed? And opposed, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to the next report from Emergency Management Couch regarding the Emergency Management Agreement with Malahat Nation 2025 to 2028. Mr. Wainwright?
It's a new button. Good morning, directors. This is just what it says it is. It's a continuation of our longstanding agreement to provide some supports to Malahat Nation. It is a 3-year term that extends and sort of updates some of the language around those services that reflects EDMA and moving forward. In addition to our agreement with Malahat, we are, as the board is aware, engaged in a significant Indigenous engagement project around emergency management. So the 3-year term reflects the changing climate for both local governments and nations around emergency management conversations. Happy to have any discussion or questions at the discretion of the board.
All right, any questions? Director Segal?
I don't have a question. I'd just like to move the recommendation.
Okay, it's moved. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Director Morrison. And to speak to it, Director Morrison?
Thank you. Fairly straightforward report. I guess my question is in regards to, there was mention in there of Malahat wanting to embed and train and be very responsible in a delivery of that service for their members in their community. So 3-year term, it all makes sense, but my question is, do we have a vision of, say that they are able to manage to achieve that vision and the infrastructure and the staffing and the likes for establishing their own service delivery? How would that look within our emergency management overall global structure? Would we be inviting participation in our overall regional district emergency management delivery? And is that something that we're moving forward with other nations?
Mr. Wainwright?
Through the chair to the director. So I think when I refer to that broader Indigenous engagement conversation that we're involved in, and we're planning a couple of sort of major engagement events in September to ask just those questions. What is the understanding of the relationship around emergency management that all 25 nations have? And with our strong sort of established historical partners like Malahat, like Cowichan tribes, who are moving towards sort of growing their own programs. What does that look like? What does integration, cooperation look like in the future? So we don't know today, but we do know that the resources are becoming available to grow those programs and have those conversations.
All right, if there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? motion carries. Thank you. We'll now move on to question period. Any members of the, nobody there? All right, so we're now about to move into closed session, but I'll turn to the committee. I'm happy to move straight into close. We have a couple items to deal with there, or if you want to take the break for lunch, we can refer these to closed board session. What's the? We're checking on that right now, just one sec.
He's still online. If we could move into.
All right. Okay, motion to move into closed. Moved by Director Nicholson, seconded by Director Wilson. All